Hello, and everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Florida Student Success Center webinar on the Florida Mathematics Redesign Update. We look forward to sharing with you the progress that the work groups have been making over the last several months, as well as next steps regarding their progress. Before we get into content, I'd like to go over webinar logistics. Participants will be on mute for the duration of the webinar. Materials from today's webinar are available in the handouts pane. You'll find a copy that you can download. We will also email a copy of the PowerPoint as well as a link to the recording of this webinar to folks who aren't able to attend. And then if you have a question at any point during the webinar, please use the questions pane to submit questions that you have, and during the question and answer portion of the webinar, we will address those questions. This is Carrie Henderson. I'm the Executive Vice Chancellor for the Florida College System, and the agenda for today's webinar is to provide participants with a brief overview of the Florida Student Success Center, an overview of the mathematics work groups and their charge, their purpose, as well as their deliverables, some updates on the milestones and the progress that the work groups have been making over the last several months, a review of some critical and key resources, and then lastly, end the webinar with question and answer portion. Before we begin, I'd like to remind folks a little bit about the Florida Student Success Center. In February of this year, the Helios Education Foundation granted $1 million to the Florida College System to create the Florida Student Success Center. And the role of the Student Success Center is to support institutional initiatives that improve college completion rates and promote student success. In Florida, our vision is to serve as a resource of evidence-based innovative practices, as well as providing timely information for colleges. What are student success centers? Florida became the 15th state in the nation to have a student success center, and student success centers are statewide organizations that support community colleges' efforts to develop student-centered pathways and increase student completion rates. Centers also help colleges align priorities, integrate student success efforts, maximize resources, and present a collective voice of practitioners in policy discussions. And student success centers nationally have the opportunity to participate and engage with other student success centers around best practices, peer collaboration, as well as professional development. Student success centers are guided by 5 pillars. The first pillar is to provide coherence, recognizing that Florida has a very diverse group of 28 colleges. Part of the Student Success Center's role is to help provide coherence and organize initiatives under the Florida College System so that colleges may learn from one another and identify areas of overlap as well as areas to learn from one another. The second pillar is to connect policy and practice. This is really important as we think about particularly mathematics redesign. We know that good practice can dramatically improve student success. And as we think about what the future of Florida looks like regarding mathematics, connecting policy, state-level policy, as well as institutional policy is critical to the work. The third pillar is convene. So providing structured opportunities where individuals from different colleges, institutions, organizations can gather and talk about critical issues related to community college student success. Fourth, improving data capacity at the institutional level, making sure that institutions have access to data and information that can inform their decisions. And then the last pillar of Student Success Centers is to promote research and knowledge development. A key component of what we anticipate will happen with the Florida Student Success Center is the development of policy and practice papers, as well as some original research that can inform the field. Now that I've provided an overview of what the Student Success Center is, I'd like to transition to our major initiative this first year of implementation, and that's mathematics work groups. So why focus on mathematics? According to the Dana Center Mathematics Pathways, nationally, hundreds of thousands of students a year fail higher education math courses. Community colleges identified math as the most significant barrier to post-secondary attainment, and that challenge is true particularly for students of color. To ensure that all students can achieve momentum and earn a college degree, we recognize that as a state, we must work together to redesign pathways and courses, modernize content and instruction, and eliminate barriers to students. And so for those reasons, Florida high school, college, and university faculty are collaborating on a statewide initiative designed to close achievement gaps and improve student success in mathematics. As we embarked on this work, we recognized that this problem and this opportunity is not for the Florida college system alone. As we think about the K-20 education system in this state, we recognize that the progression from high school to college is a critical touch point and of critical importance to student success, both in the Florida college system, as well as when they enroll in the state university system. And for that reason, we organize the mathematics work groups in 3 different categories. The first is focused on high school to post-secondary alignment. The second is focused on Florida college system mathematics sequences. And the third, Florida college system to university alignment. Each of these work groups are operating independently, but we provided some guidance to assist them in getting started. And so we anticipate that the first work group, high school to post-secondary alignment, will explore how high school curriculum and mathematics aligns with post-secondary expectations. This may include clarifying college entrance requirements and identifying if there's an alignment between high school assessments and courses, as well as what happens when students transition to post-secondary. Looking at data on math sequencing and student success, engaging high school and college mathematics faculty in a dialogue about post-secondary expectations, and identifying strategies that promote greater alignment. The Florida College System Math Sequences Work Group will examine multiple pathways for students to enter that are based on programs of study, and this work group will also explore the redesign of course structures to maximize support for students. These activities could include identifying course and institutional structures that promote or deter success, encouraging the modernization of mathematics content and instruction, reviewing data on student success, both across algebra pathways as well as non-algebra pathways, such as statistics or quantitative reasoning, and then identifying a sequence of courses for students to take based on what their intended transfer major or meta major is for students who are looking to transfer. The third work group, Florida College System to University Alignment, will examine how Florida College System curriculum and mathematics aligns with university expectations, particularly for students in transfer programs. We know that 50% of juniors and seniors in the state university system come from the Florida College System, so it's of critical importance that our 2 systems work together to streamline these pathways. And that may include clarifying university mathematics requirements, looking at longitudinal student data on math sequencing and student success, engaging Florida College System and State University System mathematics faculty and dialogue about post-secondary expectations, and then identifying strategies that promote greater alignment. When we think about the charge of these work groups, it is really designed to explore complex issues for all of the reasons that we just discussed. Our guiding values are transparency, collaboration, respect, diversity, and evidence-based inquiry. And the deliverables of the 2 work groups, the first is a catalog of evidence-based practices that are designed for scale. And the second is to develop recommendations for state and institutional policy and practice around mathematics redesign. This work kicked off in September with a face-to-face meeting at St. Petersburg College, and it will continue through the next year, culminating in a one-day institute anticipated in June of 2019. Between now and then, each of the work groups will engage in reading, research, and other related activities that will contribute to the outcomes and the deliverables for the work group. We currently have 28 faculty and administrators per work group, representing K-12 public school systems, the Florida college system, and the state university system. Given the overwhelming interest in this work and its importance, we created a members at large group who will engage through newsletters and webinars and submit feedback as these work groups identify to collect evidence-based practices and policy recommendations. To lead the work, we identified work group chairs, one per work group, and we are pleased that Professor Cynthia McInnes from Northwest Florida State College is the chair of the High School to Post-Secondary Alignment Work Group. Dr. Julie Phelps from Valencia College is chair of the SCF Math Sequences Work Group, and Dr. Tommy Mitten from Seminole State College of Florida is chair of the College to University Alignment Work Group. Chairs are responsible for providing leadership and oversight over all of the work groups. And the way that we've organized each of the work groups is providing each chair with staff liaisons, and these are individuals within the Florida Department of Education, as well as the Office of the Board of Governors for the state university system, who can assist with data and policy review and analysis and providing additional technical support. And then under each of the work groups, we have huddles. And huddles are small subsets of the work groups that are going to do the deeper dive into identifying what the challenges are related to Math Pathways redesign, as well as identifying and mapping solutions to challenges. Later in the webinar, we'll talk about the specific huddles and what their focus on will be for the next year. As I said earlier, we have several deliverables that we would like the work groups to achieve. And as they set out their work, we encourage them, as we often encourage our students, to begin with the end in mind. And so as we think about what the outcome of these work groups will be, we see it really in two different lenses. The first is policy recommendations. At the state level and at the institutional level, what are particular policies that will support student progression through and success in mathematics course sequences? How can there be greater alignment between the high school, the college, and the university systems? And what does that look like from a policy and a strategy perspective? And so the work groups will explore and answer these questions. What is the strategy? Why does this recommendation need to be implemented? What resources are needed? And who needs to be involved? The second deliverable the work groups will produce is a collection of evidence-based practices. We recognize that many practices may not yet have an evidence base because they may be new or innovating. And that's acceptable here. We want institutions to explore and identify what might become an evidence-based practice related to math redesign. And so we'd like these work groups to identify what those practices are, where, if anywhere, it has been implemented, the evidence of success, and replication. Can this practice be replicated in other settings? And so as the work takes place over the next several months, these are the two deliverables that the work groups and the huddles will be working towards. We organized the work in terms of milestones. These milestones were based on the Dana Center out of the University of Texas at Austin, milestones that they created for State Pathways redesign, and we refined them based on what our needs are here in Florida. The first milestone, which I'll review later today, is defining the challenges, and that was reviewing a key survey to identify what challenges are related to the work that these work groups will take on and synthesize those findings. The second milestone is to prioritize the challenge. This took place at the kickoff meeting in September. And during that time, these work groups prioritized the challenges and assigned members to huddles, which are those smaller working groups who are going to identify solutions. We are currently in the milestone 3 phase, which is gathering information. And so we're encouraging these work groups to identify factors that contribute to the challenges, identifying evidence, drivers, and root causes of challenges. And so this is where the work groups will really focus on looking at the data and the evidence base and identifying what additional information may be needed before solutions can be developed. Looking forward to the spring term, we anticipate Milestone 4 will take place in January of 2019, and these are when the work groups will begin linking challenges to solutions. They will brainstorm and evaluate potential solutions to the work that they identified this semester. Milestone 5, which will take place roughly in February of 2019, is to begin prioritizing the solutions and develop formal recommendations out of each of the work groups. And then Milestone 6 is policy recommendations and evidence-based practices. So actually producing the deliverables and being ready to share those deliverables in the summer of 2019 with a larger group of stakeholders from across Florida's public education system. I'd like to switch gears now and provide you, now that you have an overview of the framework and the structure that we've provided around the work groups, provide you with an overview of milestones 1 and 2, which provide a really good foundation for understanding kind of the focus of the work and where these work groups are headed. So the first milestone, as I said, was defining the challenges. To define the challenges, we implemented a survey prior to the kickoff meeting in September to gain a perspective about challenges related to implementing redesign and pathways across high school to post-secondary, mathematics sequences within a Florida college system institution, as well as college to university alignment. And this survey results informed the work of the mathematics redesign work groups as they take on this effort over the next year. The survey was open-ended. We asked, what are the challenges with implementing math pathways as it relates to those 3 areas? In terms of how the results were coded, they were inductively coded using a sampling and recoding technique. This was done manually, and we used an independent coder method, and a peer debriefing/checking were used to validate the code. The folks who participated in the actual coding process are Department of Education staff, and so to ensure that the codes that we assigned and therefore sort of the results that we assigned were correct, we consulted with the mathematics workgroup chairs to ensure that our understanding of the particular open-ended language that was used was correct, as the folks who actually completed the survey are not mathematicians. The survey was sent to members of the Florida Mathematics Redesign Work Group. It was 117, including all of the 4 work groups, all 3, as well as the at-large membership, and the response rate was 47.9%. And so as we think about the results, we created, before we began any analysis, a word cloud to generate, to see where there are frequencies of terms that appear multiple times. If you aren't familiar with word clouds, it's a way to use a large block of text, in this case, open-ended survey results, to identify where there might be patterns in repeating words or phrases. And so here you can see on the screen the high school, the Florida College System math sequences, and the university results. Some of these are sort of apparent. Math and math courses appear multiple times, but you can also begin to see things like graduation requirements, communication, developmental courses, placement, pathways are terms that do appear multiple times and by multiple people. And so what did the results show? We were surprised to learn that many of the responses were shared among all 3 work groups. And I'm going to start by talking through what was shared between high school, between the Florida College System, and between the state university system. And that's the information in the text to your right. The first item that appeared as a common challenge was an ambiguity in sequencing, a perception that the sequences that are developed are so numerous that it becomes difficult to understand all of the options that students have for completing a sequence, particularly as it relates to which mathematics course they should take. Another item that emerged throughout the survey was that student indecision regarding either attending college, whether or not they want to go to college, or the indecision about selecting a program of study are both challenges as we think about placement of students, not only into mathematics courses, but in the larger context of what program they want to enroll in. And that challenge was seen across all three groups. And so trying to kind of hone in on helping students maybe not decide on their program of study if they're not at that place yet, but maybe identifying at a broad meta major level to help inform which math sequence to place them on. The third shared challenge was a misalignment and a miscommunication between systems. We consistently heard examples of high schools and colleges not talking to each other, likewise colleges and universities not talking to each other, and then a misalignment between the courses, between the offerings, between the expectations between those three systems. We also heard consistently that there isn't an alternative to algebra in terms of the pathways. We know that there are many courses that are currently being offered that are alternatives to the traditional algebra pathway. But what emerged through the survey was a perception that while those courses may exist, institutions are not placing students on sequences that are alternatives to algebra. And so thinking about, is there a STEM pathway that's algebra-based versus a non-STEM pathway, having those discussions and actually placing students along pathways based on what their intended transfer major is. Within the survey results, we heard a lot of examples of a one-size-fits-all pedagogy. This really emerged in talking about the use of technology, instructional materials, as well as really a lack of modernization and a lack of contextualization of mathematics content. That was something that we heard consistent across all systems. And then lastly, a lack of fundamental understanding of basic mathematics concepts. Within all three systems, it became apparent that sometimes students just don't have the basic math skills that they need to be successful in a course. And of course, that can have long-term implications for the student's pathway. Now I'd like to switch gears to talk a little bit about what was unique to each of the work groups. When we looked at the high school work groups, the first thing we learned was a perception that the school districts have a lot of discretion in offerings in terms of what courses are offered, but more so in terms of the sequence and the progression of courses that students are placed on. Second, student motivation. And so this idea that students may not be motivated to be successful in math, as well as may not have that growth mindset. They may not consider themselves math people, or may have had bad experiences with math, and that can influence their motivation and their desire to be successful. And then third, that students who are leaving high school aren't prepared to be successful in college. So not specific to mathematics, but thinking about strategies such as time management, study skills, ability to access library and learning resources. Sometimes high schoolers don't leave high school with those skills that they need to be successful in college. Switching to the Florida college system, course scheduling became a theme that we heard from survey respondents, that it becomes very difficult to schedule math courses when there are multiple sequences, as well as when you have multiple campus institutions. And then the use of adjunct faculty emerged as a challenge that was specific to the Florida college system. When we look at the relationship between high school and the Florida college system, college placement did emerge as a challenge. Mainly what we heard is a desire to move away from a single measure of college readiness and to assess students and to place students based on multiple measures. In looking at the state university system, this perception of grade inflation, that students are entering the state university system from either the high school or the college where their grades have been inflated. University also noted a pressure to pass students in these mathematics courses. And then thinking about the student perspective, large class sizes. For students who may be used to smaller class sizes, that transition to university, especially a large one, can be challenging for those students. And then lastly, specific to the university system, excess credit hours emerged as a challenge. In looking at the relationship between the Florida college system and the state university system, we identified three commonalities. The first was internal communication issues. So what we found is even within an institution, there can be communication issues between academic departments and the advising offices. And there may be differences of opinion within an institution about whether or not an algebra alternative is a good decision in terms of a sequence that students should be offered. Disciplines as well as math faculty may also have issues related to that internal communication. The second area was this notion of uncommon prerequisites. So the idea that institutions really vary in terms of the course prerequisites not being consistent and what that means, particularly as we think about students transitioning or transferring between institutions. And then lastly, advising placement emerged as the final issue. And so a notion that advisors may not have the tools or may not be equipped with the resources needed to place students along the proper mathematics pathway based on their programs of study. So that's a summary of the survey responses. That information, if you'd like to see the results, will be available on the Florida College System website. Really good information to get a sense of across the state, what do individuals who work in this field consider to be some of the challenges. So now I'd like to transition to Milestone 2, which took place at the kickoff meeting in September. And Milestone 2 was really about thinking about prioritizing the challenges. And so we encouraged work groups to identify top challenges related to the Math Pathways redesign implementation, really with the intent that these challenges would guide the work throughout the year. For each of the challenges identified, the work group created huddles. And as I said before, huddles are small working groups that will do the deeper dive of gathering information about the challenges and identifying potential solutions. Each work group has a number of huddles. When we look at the high school to post-secondary alignment work group, we have 5 huddles that emerged. And these are some of the challenges that you might have seen throughout the survey results. The first challenge, and so the first huddle, will focus on content alignment. And so beginning to think about math sequences, not only from high school to college, but even earlier in a student's secondary career. So making sure that there are pathways and it all sort of works together in terms of content alignment. The second area was professional development for math teachers at the high school level. The third was advising students into math sequences and career paths. And so thinking about what information needs to be shared with high school counselors so that they can advise students who are thinking about going to college, who have already planned on going to college, what their sequences and what their opportunities are for career pathways. The fourth is improving those fundamental math skills and concepts. So one of the challenges that was consistent across the 3 work groups was that many students lacked some basic understanding of math. And so that's something that this group will focus on. And then the final piece here is student assessment. And so making sure that we're assessing students in mathematics in a consistent way across the state. In terms of FCS math sequences, there are also 5 huddles. The first is foundation preparedness. So making sure that students are being prepared to have the basic fundamental math concepts. The second huddle is focused on multiple sequences and pathways, and so identifying potential alternatives to college algebra based on a student's intended transfer major. The third is to focus on ambiguity of math sequencing that results in some content overlap between courses. Fourth is placement, which is grouped together with advising misplacement, as well as that notion of having a single measure of college readiness. And so thinking about what placement looks like, how advisors are prepared, and making sure that that information is consistent so students have the best information to make the best choices. And then the final work group will focus on prerequisites and revisiting those for commonality. The third and final work group has 4 huddles. The first is communication about desired math outcomes for degree programs. Involving mathematics faculty in these discussions are of critical importance. And as we think about the transition from college to university, we also need to engage with discipline faculty, such as engineering, health sciences, business, to get their perspectives on if a student intends to transfer with an AA or an AS into one of their baccalaureate programs, what math outcomes do they expect that those students will have to be successful in that upper division program? Likewise, this work group will focus on alignment of course content, advising of math pathways, as well as aligning prerequisites for courses between institutions. And so as we look at these huddles, we've identified potential areas of overlap. So we do want to recognize that some of these work groups have identified challenges that are consistent across all three systems. Right now, the work groups are working independently to identify the challenges and gather information to see what information they might need to develop solutions. We anticipate that once the work groups have identified all that information, have identified their data requests and what information they'd like about policy, those work groups will come together to collaborate to ensure consistency in terms of sequences, but also ensuring that there isn't too much duplication of effort. As I mentioned earlier, the work groups are currently in milestone 3, which is the gathering information phase. We created a number of templates for the work groups to help guide their work. And milestone 3 really focuses on identifying what factors exist related to the challenge, identifying what the root causes or the drivers are that lead to those challenges, and then also identifying any additional information, any additional data that might be needed to help develop solutions to those challenges. In terms of next steps for the work groups and the huddles are working diligently this semester to finish milestone 3, the gathering information phase. And then as we transition into the new year, into 2019, the work groups will transition into starting to brainstorm and then prioritize potential solutions. We anticipate that the work groups will have another face-to-face meeting, potentially in February of 2019, in association with the MAA conference at Polk State College. But there will also be an opportunity not only for the work groups to meet, but to invite others from the college system, from public schools, as well as the state university system in June of 2019, which is the culminating event where all of these findings will be shared. So as these work groups continue, members of the at-large committee, as well as members of other Florida College System groups, such as the Council of Instructional Affairs and Student Affairs, will be kept up to date on the progress of the work groups and be given opportunities to provide feedback and guidance. If you are interested in learning more about this work and finding some of the information that I shared with you today, I'd like to draw your attention to floridacollegesystem.com. Under that website, we have a Student Success Center page, and under Guided Pathways, there is a Mathematics Pathways resources page. That page has a number of different resources, not only from sort of national groups such as the Dana Center, but we also provide some specific examples from institutions who have done some of this work already. We provide information on the charge, the values, and the deliverables of the work groups and share membership lists. And then we also provide a number of Mathematics Pathways resources, as well as copies of newsletters that we've sent out and webinars that we've had, so that anybody looking to get more information about this or be engaged in this process has the opportunity to do so. So that concludes the portion of the webinar to provide the update. I will pause to see if anybody has any questions. You can type them into the question pane. And again, as I said, after the webinar, we will be making a copy of this presentation available, as well as a web recording, so that folks who aren't able to attend this webinar will be able to access it after the fact. So I will pause for questions. All right, I got a question about from a Hudl member who wants to know how they are supposed to find their assignments. I will follow up with you directly with that information and connect you with your workgroup chair and your Hudl lead. I'll pause for any more questions. I have a question. How can I be involved with one of the work groups? And I will follow up with you directly. As I said, we really want this process to be collaborative and representative across all of the education sectors. So we appreciate your interest. Question if the survey results were available online. I believe they're on our website, but if not, we will send a link when we follow up so that you have access to the survey results and the coding that we used so you can see the frequency of coding. All right, seeing no more questions, we will conclude today's webinar. If you do have any questions as a follow-up, we will be available at FL Student Success at fldoe.org, and we will also be sending an email to all participants of this webinar, and you can reply to that directly with questions. We look forward to catching up with you again in the new year, and thank you for your interest and participation in this work.